Welcome back, CSC 121, to part 3 of our EX27 tkinter attendees list. And this will be a little more interesting because we're going to try to write some information to a CSV file. To get some background on CSV files, if you go to Documents and Resources on my Warren and go down to the bottom where it has Online Books and Resources, I wasn't sure the best place to put this, but this is all the kind of general stuff at the end. If you go down to the end of this list, however you have it set up, if you go down to the end of this, you'll see some tkinter information, some videos, forkable sample code down here, program is, some information about writing CSV files. The best thing to do is just check out, there's 3 samples here, and here's one, and you could fork this stuff and check it out, and here's a second, and then here's a third. And the way this is set up, there's read, write, and append, and we're going to actually use append, but just so you could read, you could check this out. I'm not going to go through it right now, but what happens is if you use import CSV and you use this with open, let me stretch this out so it looks normal. If you use this with open method and you set up a variable as CSV file that's set up here, and this is using R, so this is just reading, this is just running through something here. If I run this, you can see what's going to happen here. It's actually running a for loop, and it's reading, here's my file, here's my CSV file, and it has all these, it's comma delimited, so it's saying ID, picture ID, last, first, and all this stuff. So it's using 0, 1, 2, and 3. It's using basically index position 2 and 3, or 2 through 4, and that's what it's doing here. That's why it says line, and it has 2 through 4. If we just had line here, it would just show everything. If we just ran it this way, it would display everything that's in here, and it's just running a loop, and next is just skipping, this next here is just skipping the top line on here. If we didn't have this, you would see the first line that basically said picture ID and that kind of stuff, our headings, really. So that's an example of reading a file that we already have set up, and then there's an example of writing one where there's not one here yet, and we're not really going to do this, but I wanted to have an example of this, and this basically kind of has a list inside of a list, so it's putting each line as a separate kind of element here, and it's also going through here with this with open, and it's basically just writing this stuff to the file. Now you might say, well, where's a file? It's not here yet, but remember, if you write and if you append, it will create a file, and it's going to create this file right here called person.csv. So if I run this, you can see it just created it here, and it put those people in the file, including person, age that we have on here. So we added these 3 names and that heading we put in there. So you could check that out and play around with it. The one we're going to use is this one here, and I actually have this set up initially that you can input in here. So if we have a file called people.csv, and there's 3 people in the list, just made up people in the list, and if you go back here and you run this, and I'm going to put in Steve Smith, and he's 34, basically what should happen is he should get added to the list, and he's not right now. And I've had an issue with Repellent with not doing that right away, but that should work. Now that I have it forked, if I run it, let me try that again, and I'll put Steve. He's still not there, but he should be there. He should be added to this list for some, I don't know why it's not doing it, but that should be set up. If I did it in Visual Studio, it'll get set up. For some reason, this runs a little bit slow, and it doesn't get updated right away, but that's what should happen when it gets updated. As long as I have everything set up, I have people.csv, I have everything should be set up. I'd probably have to refresh it. Let me refresh it and try it one more time. Let me run it one more time, and it's not there, but let's just pretend it's there, because that should work. I know sometimes with Repellent, it doesn't do that initially. It has some issues with the outside file, but that's what should happen. This should get added here, so you're appending that file, and it should work fine when we start to do it in VS Code. So what we're going to do here, again, sorry about that, we're just pretending that'll work. We're going to use the code. You can even use this right out of here, even though it didn't work that great. I'm going to take all this stuff here, right out of here, and you could copy it right out of here, and we're not going to use much of this at all. And we'll come back here, and I'll go up to the beginning, and I'll put it here since that's where my import is, because we need that import CSV. Now I don't need this, and I'm going to create something called attendees. We're going to make a little list, so I'll create something called attendees. Don't think I need this either, because that was our input, and we don't need this for our input. And we're not going to do anything with age, so we'll take that out. And it's not going to be rows, it's going to be attendees. So I'll just kind of update this a little. We're going to take this and put it in part of a function. So we're going to have to kind of move things around here. So I'm going to create another function here at the end, and I'll say def, and I'll call it add. I'll just call it add. That'll be easier than saying add attendee. So put that there. I'll make sure I move this out. And I'm going to take this stuff, well, all of this stuff, and I'm going to put it in here. So we'll tab all this over here, and we have our attendees list. We're going to append to the attendees list, and we're going to append the last name to the attendees list. Now, one thing we didn't do yet, because we set up variables in here, but we're going to have to use these again. So let's just grab these again, because we still need a way to do that. And if these are inside the show name function, they won't be available here. So we're going to put this, we're going to just kind of copy these and put them here. And that way we can kind of reinitialize the variables. And we don't need full name, we just need first and last. So we're still going to get the information from first and last. So we're kind of circumventing what's happening here. That's still going to happen. So that's the way I want it to start. Then I have my three functions. And this is the function we have here, attendees list with nothing in it. We're going to get first, we're going to get last, and we're going to append it to the list, and we're going to append that to the list. And this is going to be attendees, and this is going to be attendees.csv. And make sure that you create an attendees.csv that just has first and last. You could just make a new file, click on here, even if I got rid of this thing, even if I deleted it, I'll just go here and delete it, move to trash. The way I would set it up is I would just make a new file here, just call it attendees, and give it a .csv. And when it's set up here, just put in first, comma, last. That's all you need to do. Make sure you save it, do a Control S, and then just kind of ignore it for now. You could leave it open, and then I'll come back here and just make sure this is exactly the same as that, and make sure you have A for append. And I didn't have a problem on the Mac, but on Windows we had an issue. So I'm going to put one other argument here, and it was new line equals empty string. And I didn't need this on the Mac, but we needed it on Windows, so I'll tell you to put this in here just in case you're doing this at home. So just call new line. That'll just keep it from making a space between each line. It's not a big deal, but that'll help it a little bit. But just double check that we're basically saying with open attendees.csv, we're appending, and write file is going to be our variable name. So that's why it says writer equals, and there's another variable here, writer equals CSV writer. This is a method, a CSV method. That's why it says CSV.writer, and then it's going to be write file, and then it's going to be writer.write row. Write row is another method that's going to write it to attendees. So that's going to actually write the attendees list as a row. So each time we do that, it's going to keep appending what we created to a list and keep showing those things and add it to that CSV file. So that's what's going to happen, or that's what should happen as we work through this. And now we have this add. Add is going to be added to our last button. So it's going to be command equals add. And we checked that add wasn't a keyword, so we can use that as a function name, even though you should be a little more specific. But that will be our function that'll be on that last button. And we could have one that actually clears everything out at the same time too. But let's just see if this works first of what we have set up. So we have our attendee set up. So I'm just going to try it out and see what happens. And there it is. And I'm going to add Bob Jones. And I'm going to hit insert. Now this doesn't do anything to our CSV file, but when we do this, that adds our attendee, and then we can clear it out. Now what would be better is if when you hit add attendee, it said something like added and it cleared everything else. And we could do that. But let's just see if it worked first before we do anything else. Let's close this up and go to attendees, and there it is. Now this got moved, and I think if we didn't have our cursor there, I think when we do it the next time it'll work out okay, but we could go in here and just move this. I think even if you have your cursor here, I think it'll add it here. So I'm going to go back here, and we said if we add a clear, and actually what we can do is we can, when we add, the first thing we could do, or we could do it at the end, we could actually run the clear function. We'll just say clear, and it'll clear everything out and let us start again. And we could have put something that said attendee added or something, but we'll just do that. That'll be easy. That'll be our easy solution, at least for now. Let's try it one more time and see what happens. And I'll add Mike Jacobs, and I'll say insert, And there's Mike Jacobs, and then I know it's spelled right, and I'll hit add attendee, and that should wipe everything out. And if I go to attendees, Mike Jacobs, and that works out okay. You can see now it's adding it. When I put my cursor there, it seems to be adding. I'm not sure if we close it up what it'll do, but we could even close it up and then see what happens. We could close it up and add another one to it, and I'll close this window first, and I'll run it again, and I'll put Lee Majors, insert, add attendee, and now if I want to open this up to see what happened, you can see Lee Majors got added to the list. And again, a CSV file is one that you can open up in Excel. So if you actually wanted to create a real spreadsheet that you would need for something that you wanted a front end, tkinter is a nice little interface to do that on the desktop. So that's what we wanted to try to do with this, try to make something somewhat functional. It's just our first stab at doing this. But let's take a look at the code again just to make sure we have everything here. We need our tkinter import. We also need a CSV import, and we have 3 functions, one for show name, and that just takes the information and puts it into that entry 3. And then a clear just wipes everything out. It's using a delete method in all the fields. And then the add is the one where we created a list called attendees, and then it basically put the first name and then put the second name. And remember, when you make a list, it's putting a comma in between, so that's why we kind of did that. And then we're appending the first name and appending the last name to that list, and we're making little lists each time, basically. So we're making a list of first and last name, a 2-name list each time we do that, and then we're actually using this CSV writer to actually write that list as a line or as a row in that file. So that's what we're actually doing, and we're using append so that it keeps adding to it each time. And remember, when we use with open, we don't have to use a close file, so that's kind of naturally built into it. And we use this on Windows because it was putting extra space in our Windows version if we didn't have that. I think if we take this out here just to try it out on the Mac version, I don't think I should have a problem, but I think on Windows we were having spaces between there. So I'll just try it one more time. I'll add one more name if I could think of something. Put in Billy Madison. That's all I could think of right now. I'll insert, add attendee, and let's see what it did here. And that actually worked out okay. So on the Mac it works out okay, but on Windows it sometimes makes an extra space. So you might need that new line, that extra argument that said new line equals an empty string. So just add that in if you're working on Windows. If you're working on a Mac, you could probably leave it out. So that's it for now. So if you get that set up, what you can do is you can copy all this code, copy all this, and then basically go to a repellet and make a new repel. And you could put in tkinter and create your repel. And you could just call it 27. And you could just call it that. Now, I'm not sure what I have. I'll just call this V2 because I'm sure I have other versions in here. So I'll just do that. But you could just call it, on yours, just call it EX27 and then paste this in. And you might say, well, what about my file? Well, you could do this wherever your file is. I have mine under GitHub, and here's my TK file. You could do this. If you have this attendees, you could just drag this over here and it gets added to your repel. And then you could just share this with me. You could even try it in here, but I don't think it was working in here either. Sometimes Repellet it has some issues with, although we didn't have it with a text file, but it was having issues. We could try it in here just to see what happens. I'd be surprised if it worked. But already it's not leaving capital letters in here. I'll add attendee, and I'll see what it did here. And see, it didn't add it. So it's still having issues adding these things to these files in here. I'm not sure exactly what that is, but I've had it work before, so I'm not sure what the issue is, but sometimes it gets a little buggy. But as long as it's working in VS Code, that's the important thing, because running tkinter is certainly a little buggy in here, and I'm sure working with external files is probably a little bit buggy in Repellet as well, but otherwise it's been very happy with Repellet. So anyway, that's it, and then you could just share your Repellet here. That way I'll see your file that you had in there, if you had any names that got added to that when you tried it out, or if you don't get to do that, that's okay. But share your file here, add it to the comment for EX27 if you haven't done that exercise yet. So that'll be it. All right, thanks for watching.